Islamic Relations hosted a news conference to respond to these new regulations by the Immigration and Naturalization Service on tracking certain foreign visitors to the U.S. You'll hear from a number of groups that represent Islamic Americans and the American Civil Liberties Union. This is about 25 minutes.
Okay, you ready? All right. Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming to this press conference. We've called this press conference to voice our concerns as members of the civil rights community about the proposed plan that Attorney General Ashcroft announced today in a press conference. My name is Jason Erb. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs here at the Council on American-Islamic Relations. CAIR is a civil rights and advocacy group for Muslim Americans. It is the premier civil rights group for Muslims in the United States. We have members today here from, of course, the Council on American-Islamic Relations. We have Tim Edgar from the, we have Nihad Awad, who is the Executive Director of the Council on American-Islamic Relations. Tim Edgar from the American Civil Liberties Union. And Shakir El-Sayed from the Muslim American Society. And again, thank you all for coming on such short notice. And with that, we will start with statements and then open the floor to questions. We'll start with Nihad Awad, Executive Director for the Council on American-Islamic Relations.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you all for coming. The announcement that was made today made us very concerned as American Muslims and Arab Americans in this country. We believe that in the post-September 11th world, we understand the need for heightened and increased security in the United States, like all citizens. But we want to prevent, of course, another terrorist attack. The statement that was made today and the guidelines that we have heard and watched Mr. Ashcroft saying on television are alarming in a way to us, because we believe that no community of faith or ethnicity should be targeted for any security measures. Discrimination and profiling, whether religious or racial profiling, was never necessary, never worked, and we believe it will never work. Unfortunately, there are some incidents that have taken place after September 11th and some measures that were introduced by the current administration that lead us to believe, Muslims and Arabs in this country, to believe that the government is cracking down against the Muslim community and Arab community here, which we believe is un-American and wrong. And let me just cite some examples for you. First of all, the interviewing of 8,000 legal visa holders, the detention without due process of 1,200 individuals, the targeting of Muslim and Arab absconders, the use of secret evidence, the raids on Muslim homes and institutions, and the new FBI guidelines allowing surveillance of mosques engaged in illegal activities. All these have failed to result in a single terrorism-related arrest. Law-abiding residents in this country and visitors should not be harassed, should not pay the price for the failure of the government to protect America from the terrorist attacks in September 11th. We should not scapegoat people because it looks okay. We give the false impression that we are introducing strong sense of security measures. But we believe that sending a wrong message to a community like the Muslim and Arab community, who should be an ally on the war and on terrorism, we should not alienate this community. We should work with it. We should not scapegoat it, and we should not treat it as guilty by association. Americans will never accept it if American citizens are fingerprinted or photographed at border lines in different countries. We should not allow it. We don't accept it. and therefore we should not allow it to foreign nationals who visit this country. Remember that this country was founded on the values of liberty and generosity. It should not be exploited in the wrong sense, but also we should not destroy it, just to give a false sense of impression that we are introducing smart measures of security. Finally, I would say that we call on the American people of conscience, to voice their concern and to contact their elected officials. We should put an end to the eroding measures of civil liberties in this country. We believe in heightened and increased security, but we should introduce smart measures, but not measures that give the wrong impression and send the wrong message to Muslim and Arab societies and countries. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Thank you very much. My name is Tim Edgar, and I am legislative counsel, a legislative counsel with the American Civil Liberties Union. Today's announcement by Attorney General John Ashcroft is the latest in a series of increasingly draconian steps targeted directly at persons of Arab and Muslim background in the United States. The Justice Department's secretive detention campaign of over 1,000 Arab and Muslim citizens and immigrants, mostly Arab and Muslim citizens and immigrants, its highly coercive voluntary interviews of thousands more of mostly Arab and Muslim men, and its flagrantly selective enforcement of deportation orders have now been eclipsed by a new campaign of fingerprinting and registration. The department's fingerprinting and registration scheme will affect approximately 100,000 persons from countries whom the Attorney General refuses to name, but which he describes as, quote, of elevated national security concern, unquote. The organizations in this room know what that euphemism means. It means Arabs and Muslims. No evidence of involvement in terrorist activity or actual links to terrorist groups trigger the elevated national security concern. Rather, these people will be compelled, not asked, as the Attorney General says, but compelled to undergo fingerprinting and registration based purely on who they are, not what they may have done. History shows that when America has focused on group characteristics, not individual suspicion, in responding to threats to our security, the results have been to seriously undermine our nation and our values. The terrorists gained another victory today. These steps are not only an affront to our values, they won't work. Wasting scarce law enforcement resources on hunting down, fingerprinting, and registering innocent Muslim and Arab immigrants and visitors to this country will divert federal agents from the task of investigating and preventing actual terrorist activity and arresting real terrorist suspects. Moreover, and this I think is something that's of serious concern given the context that we have had in the civil liberties and immigrants' rights community with the Justice Department and White House over the past few months, as scores of sheriffs, police officers, and police associations have said, involving local law enforcement in immigration enforcement, as the Attorney General has now officially proposed to do, will squander the trust between law enforcement and immigrant communities and drive a wedge between the local police and those communities that is necessary to fight crime and terrorism. ACLU has long opposed these kinds of discriminatory policies. We've opposed alien registration since the first time Congress proposed to enact it. And unfortunately, that is now being revived. And as it has in the past for over 80 years, we will continue to oppose this kind of misguided policy. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Shakir Said from Muslim American Society, and then Sarah Elantawi from the Muslim Public Affairs Council.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shakir El-Sayed with the Muslim American Society based in Washington here. We are extremely concerned about the measures after measures after measures that neither provide security nor addresses the terrorist threats that we are alerted about every other week and every other day, nor do they submit any factual evidence to their effectiveness. In fact, it is the opposite. The FBI recently only have come up to tell us that they have too much information to sort out. Now, adding 100,000 people to a database is not less information to sort out. It is much more than what they are saying already they cannot handle. Giving us the false sense of security that the more we arrest people, whether or not they are linked to terrorists, the more we put people in jail, the more we list people on lists with new labels that we should feel better, the more we should ask the government, what is the link? Because America has never felt safer under the McCarthyist era. In fact, we felt more threatened by the rules that were brought at that time. We feel similarly threatened that our civil liberty is being eroding and our rights as citizens and as Muslims who live in this country, and the rights of our guests who come to visit with us, to stay, visit family members, or study, or do research, or open doors of communication and understanding between America and the Muslim world in particular. Those people are becoming much less in number today than they were before September 11, exactly because similar measures. When the Patriot Act was passed as law, we heard Mr. Ashcroft saying, we will not need more laws. This is enough for us. Facts belied his statement at that time, and they belie his statement today that those new measures will offer us any more security than they did before. More information for the intelligence community is not the way to go. In fact, less precise, accurate information is the way to go. And the more we expand the information we collect, the less efficient our intelligence community becomes at analysis, sorting, and pinpointing who is a terrorist and who is not. We believe that these measures are not only ineffective, they are much more counterproductive than the previous measures. They are only targeting the civil liberties of a specific group, that is the Muslim and the Arabs. And we've seen pilots taking free hands in deplaning people just on the look. And we've seen people unable to rent apartments just because of the threats that have been launched in the face of every member in our community. We have to stop the government manipulation and abuse of authority by launching false alerts and implicating a specific community to be targeted by the rest of the society. This did not work when they were under heat before. It shouldn't work now. The government should not be paid handsomely by approving every measure they take at the expense of our civil liberty without delivering safety or security to the larger society. This is our belief when the Patriot Act was being discussed. It is our belief today. We believe that the first step is to get to the bottom of the intelligence failure first, then decide what went wrong and fix it instead of scapegoating our community. Thank you.
And next will be Sarah Elantawi from the Muslim Public Affairs Council.
Good afternoon. MPAC has called the Justice Department's new regulations requiring tens of thousands of Muslim and Middle Eastern visa holders to register with the government and be fingerprinted, blatant racial profiling that will yield no intelligence value. The only people that are going to report to the nearest INS office for fingerprinting are law-abiding, innocent Muslims that have absolutely nothing to do with terrorism. This is the very community that the Justice Department needs to conduct effective counterintelligence. Continuing to alienate this community makes very little sense in terms of intelligence gathering and resource allocation for this department. The Justice Department must stop replacing targeted intelligence gathering and measures directed at reasonable suspects with collective punishment of people based on race and religion. We believe that this Justice Department move is the latest in a grave chain of events that are chipping away at our civil liberties while hindering our efforts to defeat terrorism. These dangerous erosions include relaxing FBI surveillance, interviews of Arab and Muslim men, and military tribunals. We're concerned that the Justice Department may be undertaking these measures to deflect the recent criticism regarding whether or not they could have done more to prevent the attacks on September 11th. An analogy that we would draw about this type of measure in terms of its effectiveness for counterintelligence is to say that, well, the majority of traffic tickets that we give out are given to African Americans, so therefore we're going to have all African Americans register at at specific traffic signals in order to have them in the database in case they commit a crime. Not only is that blatant racial profiling and un-American, but it's also, as you can probably tell, a tremendous waste of resources that hasn't worked in the past and will only alienate the people that the Justice Department needs at this time to help. So, thank you.
Okay. And now we'll take questions if there are any. Yes. And everybody will answer.
That's fine. So basically, you're saying that these measures are un-American, or are you also implying that they are somehow unconstitutional or illegal? And also, what alternatives do you see to these measures?
Okay. I guess Sarah, whoever wants to answer that. Sarah, you had mentioned it being un-American.
Yeah. Well, we think they're un-American because as Americans, we're used to due process. We're used to innocent until proven guilty, and to sort of preemptively fingerprint everybody who is Arab or Muslim that holds a visa is not something that's in keeping of the spirit of our tradition here. And what I think we're all saying is that the way to conduct good counterintelligence is to go with precise information on suspects, not to target an entire haystack of people based on where they come from or what their religion is.
If I may add, just a quick point. You asked the alternative. I think the alternative should be do it to everybody or nobody. So it has to be applied across the board, but we cannot single out specific ethnicity or religion. This is discrimination, and therefore it is unconstitutional, un-American, and counterproductive. It sends the wrong message to Muslims and Arabs here and abroad that the American administration is not indulged in closing the gap, but widening the gap. It has nothing to do with terrorism, but it has to do a lot with bigotry and discrimination. And I don't think this should be an American practice. Again, we reiterate what we said. We are for heightened security and better security, but we should be smarter on approaching this matter, and we should not just single out specific religious group or ethnic people.
Can I?
Okay.
Sure. Well, just for the information of people listening or watching here, we know that after September 11, the current visa system requires 21 days of waiting before you get your visa. During that time, your name, your application, or information is with the embassy before they issue you the visa. This is enough time to sort who the bad guy and who the good guy is. So after this waiting, to punish them after they travel here and tell them, give us your fingerprint at the port of entry or else go back, is a double punishment and a double jeopardy, and it is unnecessary and counterproductive.
I just wanted to add a couple of things to that. One is this is going to apply to everyone here, not just those who are coming. And also to say that the Attorney General is relying on a section of the Immigration and Nationality Act, I believe it's Section 262, that permits alien registration, non-citizen registration to be implemented. It's been used in the past. It fell dormant because it was a waste of resources and money. It didn't do anything. It didn't help the government enforce its criminal law or its immigration law. But that section says absolutely nothing about selecting specific groups based on religion and subjecting them to a separate system than everyone else. And there have been, cases on this in the past, and certainly I'm not going to say that the case law from the 50s and so on there isn't some bad case law out there, but the Supreme Court has never decided that. And so as to whether specifically it would withstand legal challenge or not, I think that it's anybody's guess, but it certainly is un-American and discriminatory, and there's nothing in the Immigration Act that specifically authorizes it.
And also, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
The Attorney General has tried to make the point today that these measures will not be directed against any specific country or ethnicity other than countries sponsoring terrorism. And so I just want to have your answer on this.
Yeah, I think it was illuminating that he failed to talk about the criteria that by which these individuals who are going to be screened, what the criteria would be. It seems pretty clear what the criteria is, and I have a good feeling it's going to be Muslims and Arabs coming from just about anywhere in the world. But he won't say, actually. It's not to the media.
It is the same group that has been deplaned from the flights. They have been banned. They have been stopped at security for extra check. This is the group that he meant. It doesn't matter where they come from. It does matter that they are grouped as one. So they come from Pakistan, from Malaysia, from Indonesia, because they are Muslims and potentially threatening the assumption, the motto operatus of the government here is that they hate us. This is the underlying policy. They hate us. So they want this they to include everybody, as many as possible.
And it seems that he left it open broad enough to include maybe, Muslims who might be coming here from England or France or Germany. I mean, it's not just specific countries. He didn't just say specific countries. He said groups of people. And so that's a pretty clear indication, I think, of where this is going.
I think it's very disturbing that the Attorney General has not specified countries, because in the past, when we have implemented registration of foreign students during the Iranian hostage crisis, when we discussed it during the Gulf War, it was based on our traditional power on foreign relations. Now, we might think that's unfair. I think we did think it was unfair to punish innocent visitors and so on for the actions of their government, but that has been the traditional justification, and at the very least, we knew that when the crisis was over, that would no longer be implemented. It would no longer be necessary. Here we have an open-ended struggle against terrorism where the justification has nothing to do with foreign relations, and in fact, we know the State Department has strongly objected to this plan precisely because they don't want to alienate those friendly governments that we need the assistance of. And so it's a far larger group of people, and it's going to go on for an indefinite period of time. And so those are all things of serious concern to us. But I think it is clear from what the Attorney General has said and what the Department of Justice has said unofficially, even if he refused to say it publicly, that this is going to be that list of groups that were the same people that were being interviewed and the same people who are being selected for enforcement of deportation orders, and that is people from Muslim and Arab countries.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Just back on the legal side of things, are you considering any sort of legal recourse?
I mean, not immediately, not right now. I think, if there's grounds for that, then I think that's what it would take. I don't think that the Justice Department is going to voluntarily rescind these new regulations. And I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to that.
Well, I don't know if I'm being too optimistic here. I always like to think the best of people. This is a proposed regulation, and there's a comment period. We would strongly object to it, and we have in the past made strong objections known about the enforcement of immigration laws by state and local officers, and that was at least delayed until what looks like today. So I think it's definitely too early to talk about legal action.
Any other questions? Yeah.
We've met with many officials in the Justice Department, and you talked with them. Is there any dialogue between you and them, or just...
Not about things that they're thinking about doing or proposing. Usually it's about things that they've already started doing and how we can try to avoid either abuses or moderate some of the rougher edges of some of the things that they're doing, or try to bring concerns to their attention that they might not otherwise hear, but not on this kind of thing. They haven't, and that's also, I think that there could be more cooperation. The Justice Department, I think, is showing that they basically view all Muslims and Arabs as being under suspicion. I don't think that they're really, at this point, capable of distinguishing between people engaged in criminal activity and innocent law-abiding residents and citizens who happen to be either ethnically Arab or members of the Islamic faith. And they're obviously just throwing a broad blanket out on anybody from this group and saying you're all guilty until we prove that you're innocent.
Just on that point, that's actually part of our frustration, is that many of our groups have had several meetings with the Justice Department and have engaged in a dialogue, have offered services, have come forward since September 11th, have attempted to work with authorities, and have made ourselves as available as possible. And we've seen time and time again that rather than pursue those channels of cooperation, what we get is one siege after another. First our charities, and then we had the raids of Muslim homes and businesses in North Virginia, and we just see one thing after another that really doesn't take up any of our offers to work in cooperation with the Justice Department. So we've tried, but it doesn't seem like we're getting a response.
Thank you.
No more? All right. Thank you. I'm sorry? Where do we register?
Where do we register?
As foreigners?
That's right. Yeah, we have ink pads outside. See how we're cooperating with the Justice Department. Thank you very much for coming.
This Friday night at 8 Eastern, C-SPAN's history series, American Writers 2, for the first time ever, takes cameras inside the historic Metropolitan Club in Washington.